You know, I've never been too big on the other side of GearTube, outside of knives, really. I never got into the watches, the sunglasses, the flashlights, and all the other miscellaneous things that GearTube tends to love. But recently, I've begun carrying a flashlight as part of my everyday carry, and I have two everyday carry systems, one for work and one for outside of work. And I've found myself carrying different flashlights depending on, whether I'm going to work or not. My standard day-to-day life everyday carry flashlight is a Nightcore MT2A Pro EDC. It's a pen light. But my work light, I have found I'm really loving this TUOWEE OL3. And then they also call it the OL3 EDC on Amazon. And it's really interesting because this is a feature-rich flashlight. And it's specific features on here that make this preferable to me as a work light. Now, I want to go ahead and preface this by saying I originally found out about this company and this flashlight because the company, TUOWEE, actually emailed me on my Cutlery Novice Yahoo email asking if they could provide me 3 different flashlights in exchange for a review, which I was perfectly okay with doing. And I was going through their catalog and I selected the 3 that I liked, this being the primary one. And they had told me, okay, we'll send them to you. When could we expect review time? And I told them, well, I like to carry and use things for, a couple of months before I review. And they were immediately taking a pause on that. They had mentioned, we have a requirement of all items being reviewed within 1 week of being received by the recipient. And I had to tell them, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm more interested in giving thorough and honest information based on actual carry, use, and testing of a product to my viewers, and I cannot do that within a week of owning the item. I just can't. I told them if they were willing to wait longer, we could continue with the provided samples. Otherwise, I would just have to tell them no. And they said, sorry, we can only provide them if you agree to turn the review around in a week. And I said, well, I can't do it then. That's not a review, that's paid advertisement, and I don't do paid advertisement. Okay, and so I ended up buying this myself on Amazon because the features really did intrigue me. And they make this in 4 different colors. They have the yellow here, they have an orange, they have a black, and they have an iridescent. I went for the yellow because I like how high visibility it is. And like I said, this is what I've been carrying every single day at work for some of the, multitude of features that it has on here. This is my very first flashlight review. I'm not really familiar with how these things are typically done here on YouTube. I haven't watched other flashlight reviews. I'm not really sure what everyone talks about, but I'm going to talk about this to the best of my ability because I really like this thing. Okay, this is a very feature-rich and very affordable flashlight. And for a budget-oriented channel, that's a big deal to me. Okay, another thing I want to quickly mention about this is you can find this from a few different sellers, marketed under a few different brand names. I know that Housebell is another brand that sells this exact same light, and the Housebell light is $10 more, even though it has the exact same feature loadout, the exact same design, everything. So keep that in mind. You'll probably find it under a variety of different names. They're likely all the exact same thing from the same OEM that's just being branded by a bunch of different vendors on Amazon in order to sell them to you for cheap. You might find it for more, you might find it for less. I paid about 20 bucks for mine, which is a hell of a deal. Okay, going through the features, this has multiple LEDs. Okay, if we look in here, you can see 3 on this end, and that's because we have a bright white, a soft white, or more yellowish light. We can activate both at the same time. We can strobe light, or if we double tap, we can UV, and that the middle one is a UV light. So we have 3 different LEDs in here. Now, they don't tell us specifically what kind of LEDs they are. They just say bright white, warm white, and UV. So I can't tell you any specifics beyond that. But I do like that we have a dial here that we can either rotate up or down to increase or decrease the intensity of the light. And this is true for every different LED available here. Okay, the strobe included. We can get a much weaker strobe if we want that for some reason, and it's also true for the UV. So there's a lot of utility here, and I do like the tactile nature of the wheel. It makes this kind of a fidget toy whenever you don't actually need it. Kind of fun that way. But I find myself primarily using the UV, okay? And the reason why is I work at the hospital. I am a shift lead for the environmental services department, which is the housekeepers, the floor technicians, and the trash technicians. And one of the ways that we test to see if our housekeepers are cleaning effectively is we'll go into the rooms right as their patient is discharged before they hit our system, and we'll take what we call a blue light or black light marker, and we'll start marking various areas that typically our housekeepers have been, potentially not cleaning well. Maybe it's the handrails on the bed, or the sharps container box, or the window ledges, or whatever. And we'll mark them down with either just a check mark, or we'll write something cheeky on there. And then after the room has been cleared off the system or off the board, we'll go up there and we'll take our UV light and we'll begin checking all of those areas we marked. So that way we know which housekeepers are doing an effective job in which areas. And so it having this feature is very useful. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off my light real quick. Okay, because especially being able to turn up the intensity so high, it really lets me see everything that I might need to see. Cycling on, here is our bright white. And it's, kind of useless on this video, admittedly. There's no real way to tell how bright it is other than taking my word for it. But it is very, very bright for such an affordable light. It isn't as bright as my MT2A Pro. I'm not going to sit here and say that it is. But it's also a different philosophy. Okay, this has a flood kind of output. Okay, the output is more flood-based, whereas my MT2A Pro is a throw-based. It's very focused, and as a result, it can obviously illuminate things that are much further away with relative efficiency. But it's not going to illuminate as broad of an area. So if we're just walking up and down hallways, having a floodlight could potentially be more useful. And at my job, it has been. Say we have a bad thunderstorm or ice storm, and we've had both this year. I live in Northeast Texas. Storms are rampant, and if something knocks out our power, our backup generators kick on. But the way our systems work is the only things that will be powered by those backup generators are anything plugged into a red wall outlet plus, mandatory systems. And there are entire sections of the hospital, entire departments that are not on that emergency backup grid. So we can't see anything. The lights don't work. So I will occasionally have to walk up and down those hallways with a flashlight to check and make sure everything is okay. I obviously can't clean in those areas, but I have to look for leaks, for potential damage on the ceiling tiles where there might be flooding now, and find those, lay down some bath blankets or some towels, put out some trash cans, whatever, and use that to collect the flood water. So having a floodlight is very useful because it allows me to see more of the hallway at a time. It's a very nice function. Okay, again, bright white, soft white, both at once. The both at once is nice just because we're obviously hitting a wider area now because we have the UV on each, or the LED on each side active. So we're able to just get a wider range. I will say one thing about the light that I find semi-useless is the strobe. Okay, and that's because here's our strobe light. Hope you don't have epilepsy. The idea behind strobe lights oftentimes is that if you're in a self-defense situation, you can get somebody in the eye with it, and then, I don't know, in my case, I carry a Monadnock 22-inch auto-lock baton. So, maybe you get somebody in the eye with this, disorient them if they're coming at you with a knife, and that gives you the opportunity to strike them in their thigh or their arm with the baton, and potentially eliminate the threat's ability to be a threat while reducing the harm that's done to you. Now, that's a great idea. It's a great function. The problem with it is, unless you have left the light on strobe for 15 seconds or more before turning it off, it won't remember that last setting. It's the same thing with every other light on here. It will only remember the last setting used if it was used for 15 seconds or longer. So now I have the strobe light on here, but if I turn it on the soft white, cycle through and turn it off, and turn it back on, it goes back to the bright white. Okay, we have to wait at least 15 seconds before it remembers the last function that we used. Now, the strobe light does have other functions besides self-defense, but that makes it largely useless in a self-defense situation because if you try to cycle to that strobe light too quickly, you're going to end up activating that UV light because we do that via a double tap. Okay, so we can't reliably get to it to use it in a defensive situation, which is very unfortunate. Bit of a problem there. All that said, I think it's a minor downside considering the cost of the light. I like the functions there, but the features don't end there. If we press and hold, we have a work light, and right now it's on bright white. Then we have orange, and press it again and we have both. Now this is particularly useful because on the other side we have a magnet. So if we have a metal surface next to us, I'll use this Kudaman JBK1 as an example. We can, obviously attach our magnetic function to that, and then now we have light wherever we're working. So if you're working underneath the kitchen sink or something, or wherever, so long as you have a magnetic surface to attach this to, we're able to attach it quite well, which is a great feature. I really, really do like that. I think it's a wonderful function to have. All right, I'm sorry if this is getting a little long-winded. There's a lot to talk about. But I do like the work light. I think it's useful. Beyond that, we also have a red laser. Turn this light out real quick. So we have a red laser down here at the bottom, which is activated via a different button. It's this button here. And the laser's pretty weak, admittedly. It's not super useful. It's definitely not as bright as a green laser. I use this for very minor things, like when reading the board to my crew at the start of the shift. I'll point to things on the board, like we're at 1,349 safety days. Our safety tip is pushing and pulling, and our discharge tip for today, our detailing work is going to be doors and door frames. So I'll use the pointer for that, but it is a very weak LED. You're not going to get a very bright green light like you would with an O light. So keep that in mind. It may be something that bothers you. Now, if we press and hold that button, we turn on the RGB function. I guess this gives us higher visibility. It's kind of nifty, I suppose. Tap it again. We get a different RGB. Okay, and just like with the LED functions down here, it has a 15-second use memory. So whatever we use for 15 seconds or more, that'll be what it immediately remembers when we turn it back on. So if we use the laser, it'll remember the laser. If we use the RGB, it'll remember the last RGB. If we double tap it, we have a flashing red light, which is supposed to be used like a road flare. So if you ever break down in the middle of nowhere, you can use this to help alert people that you're there. I think the strobe light is a better function for that. Say you broke down on the middle of an interstate or something, and you see a car coming, this will alert your presence much better than the quote-unquote road flare. But it doesn't hurt anything to have that function. The battery life is great. I have not charged this once, and you can see we're still on a functionally full charge. When it reaches 75% or lower, it drops to 3 bars showing, 50% 2 bars, 25% 1 bar. Okay, so very easy to track, and it is charged via a USB-C port. Okay, just get the trap door out of the way here. It's a rubber membrane trap door. Plug it in USB-C, and we're good to go. That battery, by the way, is a lithium ion battery. The lumen max, it is an 1800 lumen max output. I'm sorry I didn't mention that sooner. Again, first flashlight review, but 1800 lumen max output with a max throw of 149 meters or 490 feet. Pretty solid, all things considered. But again, remember, it is a flood-oriented beam shape, not a focused throw. So you're not going to get areas that are super far away nearly as effectively as you would with a like my Nightcore MT2A Pro. It just won't. It's a different design philosophy. It's a different function. The body is what they call aluminum. It feels like kind of pot metal. It reminds me a lot of the Lightning OTF knife handles. That's really what it feels like. I'll say this, the light is durable. And I know that not only from constant carry and use, but I accidentally washed this today. I forgot it was clipped to my 511 tack lights, and they went through the washing machine, and it came out almost none the worse for wear. A little bit of wear on that symbol down there, but it held up. And even when it was soaking wet, it worked perfectly. So these things are pretty water resistant. I wouldn't dive with it, but I was happy with it. I was impressed with it. Length is 4 1/8 inches. Okay, so very compact, not too thick, but it is, you'll feel it a little bit in your pocket. Only 3.6 ounces, so very, very light. Okay, I'm a big fan of that. We do have a bidirectional clip, so clip it to your pocket with good spring tension. Matter of fact, I'll show you how that looks. and it carries quite deeply when we do so. But for those who may not know, the second direction is so that way you can clip it to a ball cap. So here's my ball cap. I do wear one every day. And if we clip this on here, and I'll clip it on all the way so you can see how good the retention is, we can now use this as a headlamp. I have yet to do this, but I could see it being quite useful. And by the way, you can see it did not deform that clip whatsoever, even when I had it pressed all the way on to that ball cap. So big fan of the clip. It's worked extremely well. I have no criticisms of it. Every feature on here, more or less, is useful in some way. I think the RGB is a bit of a gimmick. It can increase your visibility at night, so I guess if nothing else, it's one way to go. I think the work light would do a much better job of that. And in fact, I ride an electric bike to and from work, and I actually have attached this, just let the magnet hold onto the bike rail, and then boom, I have a pseudo tail light because I have a history of being pulled over by the cops in my town for riding home at nighttime wearing all black, which is my uniform. So this gives me a little more visibility. I don't think there's anything else to really say. Value-wise, it's incredible. I'm going to deduct a few points for the weak laser and the strobe light requiring some cycling, which makes it less than ideal for self-defense. But overall, for $20, you really can't go wrong. Again, the TUOWEE QL3 EDC. Check it out. Fantastic budget light. Fun fidget toy. Very useful. Pretty much has a function for almost everything you need. And if that laser being weak is a downside, I'm certain some of you out there can take that out and put in a stronger green laser. I know y'all are crafty. But good battery life, good weight, good price point. It's comfortable to use. Cycling can be a bit of a pain. I wish it had, a different system to remember our last feature use as opposed to a 15-second use memory. But all in all, I like this thing. I'm impressed by it. Hope you guys enjoyed.